Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Wright. Susan Lucille Wright was born on April 24, 1976, in Houston, Texas, to parents Velma Sue and Jimmy Lawrence Wright. She was the eldest of two children and had a biological sister named Cindy. As a child, Susan was active, sociable, and creatively talented. During her school years, she developed a passion for dancing and aspired to become a choreographer. With her bright and attractive appearance, as well as her slender figure, she drew many admirers and being the center of attention. After completing high school, Susan tried but was unsuccessful in getting into college. To raise funds for her future education, she decided to take some time off. During this period, she found work as a dancer at a well-known nightclub, performing partially nude on stage. She decided to leave her job and use her savings to enroll in evening courses at a nursing school. To support herself and maintain her independence, Susan took a job as a waitress at a restaurant while pursuing her studies. However, she soon discovered that medicine was not her real passion and had trouble paying for her studies. Consequently, she stopped attending her classes to concentrate on her job. In the summer of 1997, 21-year-old Susan met her future husband, Jeffrey Andrew Wright, at the Galveston restaurant where she worked. He was immediately drawn to her beauty and radiant smile, becoming a regular customer and leaving generous tips. After some time, Jeffrey mustered the courage to ask Susan for her phone number. He would call her daily, sometimes multiple times a day, to arrange romantic dates and surprise her with small gestures, such as sending flowers with heartfelt notes to her workplace. In the evenings, he would meet her and walk her home. The man was 8 years older than Susan, but she didn't consider this a significant issue. He was charming, attentive, and caring, which quickly won her over. However, it soon became apparent that Jeffrey struggled with alcohol and substance abuse. He claimed to have overcome his addiction to drugs and promised to quit drinking entirely. Susan, being young and in love for the first time, believed him. She thought that their love could conquer any obstacle. Shortly after, Susan discovered she was pregnant and excitedly shared the news with Jeffrey. Although he seemed pleased about becoming a father, he didn't take any decisive action, such as proposing or suggesting they move in together. Confused by Jeffrey's behavior, Susan took matters into her own hands. She insisted that their child should be born within a married family, and Jeffrey agreed to her terms. By the time they officially got married, Susan was already 8 months pregnant. They chose to have a quiet, intimate wedding without guests or celebrations, rather than a grand ceremony. Around this time, they purchased a home in a quiet area of Harris County, Texas, and moved in a couple of weeks before the birth of their child. In December 1998, they welcomed their first child, a son named Bradley, and appeared to be the perfect family. In 2001, Susan became pregnant again, and in the spring of 2002, she gave birth to a daughter named Kay. The family had a small dog named Buck, a comfortable family car. Jeffrey worked at a local construction company, and after the children were born, Susan became a stay-at-home mom by mutual agreement. She took care of the kids and created a cozy home environment. The neighbors said that Mrs. Susan was a kind person, friendly, sociable, a caring mother, and a loving wife. However, it was later revealed that the reality of their family life was far from perfect. Her husband was extremely demanding in every aspect of their lives. Susan's days were filled with cleaning, doing laundry, and cooking. Jeffrey demanded freshly cooked meals every day, prohibiting her from preparing meals in advance or reheating leftovers. Maintaining a perfect and clean home was a challenging task, especially with two small children. Additionally, Jeffrey required his clothes to be washed almost daily, as he refused to wear the same item twice. If Susan failed to meet these expectations, she faced insults, humiliation, and even physical abuse. Moreover, Jeffrey was extremely frugal, providing Susan with a meager weekly allowance of $100 to cover all household expenses, including cooking, childcare, and maintenance. Susan had to keep track of every expense, giving receipts to her husband Jeffrey. However, Jeffrey's behavior was a bigger issue. Despite promising to quit drinking, he continued and started using drugs, downplaying it as light doping for work stress. The substances made him aggressive, causing him to harm Susan and their son. Jeffrey denied his behavior was a problem, claiming Susan knew about his substance use before marriage. His parents sympathized with Susan but felt powerless to intervene. After moving in together, Jeffrey's behavior became increasingly aggressive, leading to physical, emotional, and intimate abuse. He initially apologized, but the violence became regular. Jeffrey would often go to the gym 3 times a week to practice boxing as a stress relief measure. He looked forward to sharing this activity with his son when the boy was older. On January 13, 2003, Jeffrey returned home from the gym agitated and on edge. As Susan prepared dinner, he attempted to teach their 5-year-old son some boxing moves but lost control and struck the child, causing the boy to burst into tears. Susan pretended not to notice the incident, but it was the last straw for her. Following dinner, she put the kids to bed. Meanwhile, Jeffrey stayed in the bedroom, where he continued to take drugs. There are different accounts of what happened next. According to Susan, when she went into the room, Jeffrey assaulted her, attempted to rape her, and tried to stab her with a knife. She claimed she fought back in self-defense after managing to take the knife from him. The events that followed are unclear, with different accounts of what happened. According to Susan, when she entered the bedroom, Jeffrey tried to attack her, sexually assault her, and kill her with a knife. However, she claimed she managed to grab the knife and defended herself, leading to a fight. Her story changed multiple times, but the version told in court, based on the investigation, was considered more believable. Susan decided to use her dance skills to distract her husband and lower his guard. Wearing a short silk robe over her bare body, she put on a seductive show for Jeffrey. She then suggested a role-playing game that involved tying him up, which he agreed to. Using 3 of Jeffrey's neckties, she bound his hands and one leg to the bed. She used the silk belt from her robe to secure his other leg. With Jeffrey immobilized, Susan created a makeshift gag using her underwear, pretending it was part of the intimate game. To set the mood, she lit candles and turned off the lights. Jeffrey was tied to the bed with a gag in his mouth, unable to move or speak. The room was dimly lit. Jeffrey poured hot wax from a candle onto Jeffrey's chest, which was painful but initially seemed like part of a game they were playing. However, when she poured wax onto his genital area, the pain became unbearable. Jeffrey tried to free himself and scream, but he couldn't. His wife, Susan, took a small sharp knife from the kitchen and began stabbing him repeatedly, starting at his groin and moving up his body, slashing his genitals, legs, abdomen, chest, arms, neck, and face. She began slowly, expressing her grievances with each stab, recounting the insults, humiliations, and abuse she had suffered. As she continued, Susan began to cry and stab faster. Experts later counted 193 shallow knife wounds on Jeffrey's body. Most of these wounds were not fatal, and Jeffrey was conscious for most of the ordeal. Susan's actions suggested she was in a state of extreme emotional distress. Her lawyers argued that she was in a state of affect, unable to stop even when Jeffrey showed no signs of life. She had not considered what she would do next or how she would handle the body. Shallow grave in the backyard. She sat next to her husband's body on the floor for hours. Eventually, she looked around the blood-covered bedroom and knew she had to act before dawn. She carefully checked outside through the window, ensuring the coast was clear. Her gaze landed on a shallow pit in the backyard that Jeffrey had dug for a fountain over the weekend. A plan formed instantly. This pit would become her despised husband's grave. To move the body, Susan used a garden wheelbarrow. This raised questions for investigators, as a petite woman was able to single-handedly lift and transport a man twice her weight out of the house. Suspicions of an accomplice arose but were never confirmed. Under the cover of darkness, Susan discreetly relocated the body to the pit and covered it with a thin layer of soil. She then cleaned up, removing the blood-stained curtains and bed linen, placing them in trash bags and dispersing them in different bins. The blood-soaked mattress was flipped over, as Susan was unsure how to properly clean it. She spent the remaining time until dawn scrubbing blood from the floor, walls, and carpet. Scrubbing the carpet is a big deal, with a large stain that couldn't be removed. In an attempt to eliminate any evidence of the violent confrontation, Susan applied bleach to the affected area, hoping the chemicals would destroy any remaining traces. Susan made a distressing call to her husband's parents in Austin, Texas. She was emotional as she recounted the events. Her husband, under the influence, had physically assaulted her and their son, spilled bleach on the carpet, and then ended their relationship before leaving. Jeffrey's parents were shocked and concerned by the news. Although they were aware that their son had his flaws, they felt genuine sympathy for their daughter-in-law. However, when they learned that he had hit their grandchild, they immediately offered for Susan and the children to come and stay with them. Despite their willingness to help, the young mother declined their offer. She added that she planned to file a police report and reveal all the incidents that had occurred at their residence. 2 days later, Susan visited the police station as her husband's sudden disappearance raised increasing concerns and action was necessary. Susan reported that she and her children had been victims of domestic violence perpetrated by her husband and required protection. She successfully obtained a restraining order against her husband, preventing him from approaching her and the children, although she was already aware that he would never be able to come near them again. As evidence, Susan presented bruises and cuts on her arms, which she alleged were inflicted by her husband using keys when she attempted to defend herself. Additionally, Susan had a small bruise on his face and corroborated that his father had struck him. At first, the tearful woman's story seemed believable and logical. She claimed her husband, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had attacked her and their young son. Then, realizing what he had done, he became scared and fled. However, over time, suspicions grew because Jeffrey had not contacted anyone. He appeared to have run away without his belongings, documents, or mobile phone. He didn't show up for work or visit his parents, and none of his friends or neighbors had seen him. It was as if he had vanished. Susan found it unbearable to stay in the house where she confronted her husband. She couldn't shake the feeling he was still alive and would rise for revenge. She was losing her grip on reality. Even their dog Buck sensed it, constantly barking and trying to dig up the yard where Jeffrey was buried. On January 17th, Susan went to her mother's house with her children. When her mother saw her daughter in person, she fully realized the severity of the situation. Even though she had already been aware of it, Velma directly asked if she had killed her husband, and her daughter broke down in tears, nodding in admission. The daughter then confessed to the crime, revealing the location of her husband's body, and repeatedly expressed uncertainty about what to do next. Following her mother's advice, Susan reached out to lawyer Neil Davis the next day and confessed to killing her husband and attempting to cover up the crime. After gathering all the details, the experienced defense attorney considered possible scenarios and contacted the Harris County District Attorney's Office on January 19th. Davis reported Susan's confession, including the burial of her husband's body in their backyard, and stated that she was willing to provide a full statement at the police station. On January 24, 2003, Susan voluntarily went to the police station, intent on making a full confession. However, her account was disjointed, with confusing details and occasional contradictions. She sometimes referred to her late husband as if he were still alive, expressed fear of him, and requested protection. Consequently, Susan underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The results revealed she had suffered a nervous breakdown and was experiencing depression. Despite this, the evaluation found that Susan was still capable of understanding the actions she had taken. When investigators uncovered the remains of Jeffrey from the makeshift grave in the backyard, they were shocked by the brutality of the scene, having never encountered. Experts counted a total of 193 knife wounds on the victim's body, distributed across various areas, including the groin, legs, shoulders, arms, abdominal area, chest, neck, and face. The majority of these wounds were superficial, meaning they were not life-threatening on their own. However, one head wound was severe enough to have caused death. The large number of superficial wounds suggests that the victim endured a prolonged and agonizing death, likely while still conscious, as his wife repeatedly stabbed him with a small knife. The victim's wrists and ankles showed deep marks from the ties and belt used to bind him. These injuries indicated that the victim had attempted to free himself but was unsuccessful. The ties and belt were still on the body when it was found. Additionally, there were traces of candle wax on the victim's chest and groin area. Susan claimed that the candle wax was an accident, resulting from her husband knocking over a lit candle. However, the prosecution argued that the hot wax was more likely used as a form of torture to inflict suffering on the bound victim. Furthermore, the victim's mouth contained his wife's underwear, which acted as a gag to prevent him from screaming or calling for help. Toxicological tests showed the deceased had alcohol and several controlled substances in his system, which could have led to aggressive and irrational behavior. Initially, the bedroom where the confrontation occurred seemed normal, except for a large bleach stain on the carpet. However, upon closer inspection using special chemical agents and equipment, it became clear that Susan had spent considerable time cleaning up the scene. Once wiped away blood traces were revealed, the true extent of the violence became apparent. Blood was found throughout the room, including on the ceiling, and the mattress was saturated with it. The trial began in late February 2004, with Susan having already spent a year in custody. Her children were being cared for by her parents and sister Cindy. Her lawyer was well prepared, having worked extensively with Susan to build her case. During the trial, Susan frequently broke down in tears as she recounted the events of that horrific night and the abuse she suffered leading up to it. She claimed to have endured years of cruelty and violence at the hands of her husband. The defendant, Susan, claimed that on the evening of the incident, her husband returned home from training in an agitated state. He began demonstrating boxing techniques to their 5-year-old son, Bradley, and said the boy would also take up boxing. When Bradley refused, his father hit him in the face. Susan put the children to bed and then tried to have a serious talk with her husband, urging him to seek help at a clinic. However, he became angry, grabbed his keys, and tried to leave. Susan attempted to stop him, which led to a struggle that caused injuries to her palms and wrists. According to Susan, her husband then struck her, causing her to fall and momentarily lose her bearings. After regaining composure, Susan saw her husband Jeffrey holding a knife, but her testimony became inconsistent. Her lawyer argued she was in a state of affect, leading her to seize the knife and strike Jeffrey. Susan claimed she secured him to a cart with ties and a belt after the confrontation, and candle wax accidentally landed on his body. However, the defendant had no explanation for why her underwear was found in the victim's mouth. In contrast, the prosecution presented a more convincing and logical case. Expert testimony revealed that the victim's wrist and ankle wounds were inflicted before death, likely as part of a ruse to restrain the victim. This also provided a plausible explanation for the gag in the victim's mouth. Additionally, the angle of the injury suggested that the perpetrator was positioned on top of the victim, rather than struggling with him, which would have resulted in different injury patterns. All the cuts on the victim were inflicted from the front, indicating that the attack occurred while he was lying on his back, unable to move. It was unclear whether Susan had planned her husband's murder in advance and intentionally used the pit he dug for a fountain as a makeshift grave. Prosecutors, however, suspected that she had carefully orchestrated the crime, motivated by the potential insurance payout. The case drew widespread media attention, with Susan being labeled the blue-eyed butcher or blonde meat grinder by the press. Jeffrey's family demanded the harshest possible sentence, while many of their neighbors felt sorry for Susan, recalling instances where she had bruises that she attributed to her own clumsiness, but which may have been signs of physical abuse. Prosecutors initially sought a life sentence for Susan, but later reduced their request to 45 years in prison. In March 2004, she was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. She showed no emotion when the judge delivered the verdict, appearing detached from the proceedings. A year later, her lawyer's attempt to appeal the decision was rejected. In 2008, Susan and her defense team filed another appeal, which was influenced by new testimony from a previously unknown witness. Misty McKell, wife of former NFL champion Steve McKell, was a key witness. She had a lengthy relationship with Jeffrey Wright in the mid-1990s and was briefly engaged to him. However, she suffered physical abuse, humiliation, and cruel treatment from Jeffrey, leading her to end the engagement and cut ties. Following this new information in Jeffrey's testimony, Susan's prison sentence was reduced to 20 years. She became eligible for parole in 2014 at age 38 but was denied. A second denial followed in July 2017. After 16 years in prison, Susan Wright was released in the winter of 2020 at age 44. She was met by reporters and photographers, causing her to break down in tears and ask to be left alone. Her trial received extensive media coverage, including a broadcast on court TV. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos Matsunaga was a member of one of Brazil's wealthiest families and headed Yoki, their business that produced a wide range of food products. Yoki was founded by Marcos's grandfather, Yoshizo Cadano, who had immigrated to Brazil. The company name, Yoki, was derived from the first letters of Yoshizo's surname and first name. Yoki's origins date back to the mid-20th century when it started as a small flour milling operation. Despite being formed during a time of crisis and war, the business not only survived but thrived, eventually expanding into a global company with a diverse product line. Born into a wealthy family, Marcos had never experienced hardship or denial. As the successor to the family business, he inherited the company built by his grandfather and father. With this foundation, Marcos had the potential to become the family's first billionaire, a goal he pursued throughout his life. However, his ambitious plans were ultimately unfulfilled. Everyone who knew Marcos personally described him as a skilled and successful businessman. He not only preserved but also significantly increased the family's wealth, generating substantial profits. However, Marcos had a difficult personality. He was demanding, arrogant, and controlling, particularly with those around him. Additionally, he struggled with his physical appearance, having been overweight since childhood, wearing glasses due to vision problems, and being short and somewhat awkward. These issues led to difficulties in his interactions with peers from an early age. Marcos had few friends, and women tended to avoid him because of his unusual demeanor. For a long time, he was unable to form lasting, meaningful relationships. Despite his wealth and business success, he couldn't sustain romantic connections beyond a couple of dates. His arrogance and ego often repelled women, leading him to seek the company of escorts and sex workers. There is very little information available about his first wife. It is known that he married out of desperation and pressure from his relatives, rather than love or passion. Despite this, the marriage lasted several years, but both spouses quickly regretted their decision. The young wife initially tried to tolerate his difficult personality, hoping they could become a happy couple over time. However, she was mistaken, and they grew further apart over the years. Marcos frequently cheated on her without attempting to hide or justify it. He typically found mistresses on websites offering intimacy for money. One such mistress was Alice, an escort with a portfolio on these platforms. Marcos noticed her, a bright and attractive blonde with a beautiful figure, and began regularly inviting her on dates, generously paying for them. Alice was 6 years younger than him and was born into a poor and dysfunctional family in a high-crime area of the city. She never knew her father, and her mother struggled with heavy drinking and was often involved with men who shared her addiction. As a result, Alice had a difficult and joyless childhood, facing repeated physical and emotional abuse from her mother's roommates at a very young age. As soon as she finished school, Alice left her troubled home life and neighborhood behind. She took nursing courses, which led to a job at a hospice. However, she soon realized that caring for terminally ill patients was not fulfilling her dreams or utilizing her full potential. As a sensitive and vulnerable young woman, Alice became deeply attached to her patients, and each death felt like a personal loss. A few years later, Alice decided to pursue higher education and change careers. She chose to study law, which she believed would offer her more opportunities and open doors in life. After preparing for admission, Alice scored well on the entrance exams. However, her modest nursing salary was not enough to cover the cost of her studies. Alice was alone with no one to turn to, having cut ties with her family after leaving home. To support herself, she decided to monetize her physical appearance and signed up on an escort services website. With the site's help, she created an attractive profile, and soon, wealthy men took notice of the young and beautiful blonde. Through her escort work, Alice earned a good income, enough to cover her education expenses and support herself. However, she intended to quit this line of work once she graduated and found a job in her field. During this time, Alice met Marcos, a regular client who showered her with gifts and openly dated her. Although Alice knew Marcos was married, she never imagined that one of the country's wealthiest men would leave his wife for her. Alice Matsunaga's story resembled a Cinderella tale. A poor girl from a disadvantaged background, working as an escort, captures the heart of a multimillionaire who falls deeply in love with her. Marcos lost his mind over Alice, but it's unclear if she deliberately tried to win him over. 6 months into their relationship, Marcos decided he wanted to be with Alice long-term, so he filed for divorce from his first wife without hesitation. He began introducing Alice as his fiancée to everyone. To avoid revealing how they really met in Alice's occupation, Marcos and Alice fabricated a story about meeting casually in a cafe. They stuck to this version, and even Marcos's closest relatives and friends didn't suspect the truth. However, Alice wasn't warmly received by Marcos's family, the Matsunagas. His parents suspected that Alice had used her charm to capture Marcos's heart, despite his unattractive appearance, and was now pretending to overlook his difficult personality. Nevertheless, when Marcos announced his plans to divorce his first wife and marry Alice, no one strongly objected. Marcos organized an extravagant traditional wedding, complete with a white dress, numerous guests, and a large, multi-tiered cake. Following the wedding, he relocated his wife to his spacious and luxurious mansion, where she took on the role of mistress. Matsunagi was renowned for his passion for collecting expensive wines and rare firearms. His home featured a vast wine cellar, where bottles were meticulously arranged by year and country of origin. Additionally, the house had a secret room dedicated to his extensive collection of firearms and edged weapons, which adorned the walls from floor to ceiling. Marcos took great pride in his collections and continually sought to expand them. However, his home was also overflowing with antiques, luxury items, and modern art pieces, which were somewhat tastelessly displayed on the walls and every available surface. After the wedding, they decided to start a family, but despite their efforts, Alice struggled to conceive for an extended period. Consequently, they opted for in vitro fertilization, but success was not immediate. When their daughter was finally born, it seemed that their happiness knew no bounds. Marcos and Alice were devoted to raising their baby girl, planning for her future, and later, exploring the world together as a family, immersing themselves in diverse cultures and traditions. Their daughter was raised with love, care, and every luxury, like a true little princess. However, Marcos and his wife, Alice, shared a unique common interest: big game hunting. In reality, hunting had always been Marcos's passion. He had previously tried to share this hobby with other women in his life, including his first wife, but they had all found it repulsive. Marcos had given up hope of finding someone who shared his enthusiasm. Many people now believe that Alice took up hunting to gain Marcos's favor and win his heart. Initially, they visited shooting ranges together, where Alice learned to handle various firearms. Later, they ventured into the woods to hunt wild animals. Alice showed no qualms about taking the lives of animals, treating it as a competition: either you succeed or you don't. Marcos admired this attitude and enjoyed watching his wife skillfully handle her weapons and track her prey. He also taught Alice how to hunt and prepare wild game such as boars and deer. They would skin and carve the animals together, using specialized tools like large knives, cleavers, and axes to separate the body parts. The family didn't have traditional pets like cats or dogs. Instead, they kept poisonous snakes in specially designed terrariums that mimicked their natural habitats. This was a dream come true for Marcos, who had always been fascinated by snakes but had been discouraged from keeping them by his first wife. Alice had won Marcos over by embracing his unconventional hobbies. By the spring of 2012, Marcos was on the verge of making the deal of a lifetime, one that would catapult him to billionaire status and take his income to new heights. He was busy negotiating with potential business partners, planning to sell the family company and invest the profits in a lucrative new venture. Marcos was rarely at home due to his complete absorption in work and the realization of his ambitious plans. He and his wife resided in an elite apartment complex in the city's business center, near the main office of his company. However, Marcos spent most of his time away, leaving his young wife alone and bored in their luxurious apartment with a panoramic city view. Marcos' work schedule was tightly packed with meetings, business discussions, and specialist consultations, often keeping him away from home overnight. Despite this, he promised his wife that once the deal was finalized, their lives would undergo a significant transformation. But on May 19, 2012, the eve of $1 billion deal, Marcos vanished without a trace. His wife, Alice, did not report Marcos missing until the next day. She believed he was at work, attending a scheduled meeting that could have lasted into the night and early morning. Marcos was supposed to meet a business partner and had warned Alice that he might spend the night at the office before heading straight to the meeting. However, when Marcos failed to return home and stopped answering his phone, Alice grew concerned and filed a missing persons report. Police quickly discovered that Marcos had missed both the evening and morning meetings, which was unusual for him. This led them to suspect that Marcos might have been kidnapped, and they expected a ransom demand to be made to his family within hours. Despite this, 24 hours passed, followed by another 24 hours, without any ransom demands. As time went on, hopes of finding Marcos alive began to dwindle. Meanwhile, investigators questioned Marcos's relatives, friends, and business partners to see if he had any enemies or if anyone might benefit from his disappearance or the disruption of his upcoming deal. However, they were unable to identify anyone who might have wanted Marcos dead. Marcos was a skilled businessman who made strategic decisions that generally benefited everyone. However, his personal life was marred by infidelity. His wife, Alice, discovered that he was cheating on her with a woman named Natasha. Despite his promise to end the affair after Alice threatened to divorce him, Marcos continued to see Natasha, albeit more discreetly. Alice suspected that the affair was ongoing and hired a private detective to gather evidence. The detective uncovered photographs and videos of Marcos and Natasha on romantic dates at restaurants and venues that Marcos and Alice regularly visited. It seemed that Marcos was openly flaunting his infidelity, taking his mistress to places where he was well known and where his wife might find out. As it was later revealed, Natasha Lima, a businessman, was discovered on the same escort services website where he had first met Alice. They had been together for approximately 5 months, during which time he gifted her an expensive car and paid a substantial sum of money for Natasha to delete her profile from the site. Alice presented photos and videos as evidence of her husband's infidelity to Marcos's parents. She mentioned that she had shown all this to Marcos the day before his disappearance, but instead of apologizing and asking for forgiveness, he packed his belongings, informed his wife that he was leaving her, and then departed from their apartment, vanishing without a trace. Based on Alice's account, it seemed that her husband had given in to his desires and decided to run away with his new mistress. However, those who knew Matsunaga unanimously agreed that he was too invested in the business, which his family had built over decades, to simply abandon it and disappear. The answers to many questions were uncovered about a week later when a passerby discovered scattered garbage bags containing human remains in a deserted area roughly 50 kilometers from Marcos's residence. The man immediately notified the police of his gruesome discovery. The victim was soon identified as Marcus Matsunaga, a missing person who had been searched for nationwide. According to experts, Matsunaga was shot in the head and then dismembered. His body was packed into garbage bags and dumped on the outskirts of the city. The killer's skills with a carving knife suggested they were either a surgeon or an experienced butcher. This conclusion was drawn from the precise cuts made to separate the body parts. The investigation initially lacked concrete leads, so it began by reviewing the last known location of the deceased. The elite residential complex where Matsunaga lived with his wife and daughter had multiple surveillance cameras, and their footage was carefully examined. The evening before Matsunaga went missing, he and his wife ordered food to be delivered to their home. Security footage shows Matsunaga taking the elevator to the first floor, then returning to his apartment with pizza boxes in hand. He entered the apartment and never left again, not that evening, overnight, or the next day. Despite this, his wife was seen leaving the apartment the following morning with 3 large, wheeled suitcases. The footage shows Alice struggling to move heavy suitcases, which sparked the investigators' suspicions about their contents. On the same day, she was taken into custody and questioned at the police station. Initially, she denied any wrongdoing, sticking to her story that her husband had left her for another woman. However, when shown the elevator footage, she broke down in tears and began to open up. Alice revealed that her marriage had been troubled for a long time, and her husband's behavior had become increasingly abusive. He constantly belittled her, bringing up her past work as an escort and claiming he had rescued her. He also controlled every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and criticizing her parenting. When Alice mentioned divorce, Marcos threatened to leave her with nothing, take their daughter, and restrict her access to the child. On the evening of the incident, Alice confronted her husband with photos of him and his mistress, which only enraged him. He physically abused her, and Alice's memories of what happened next are hazy. She doesn't recall how she obtained the gun used to shoot her husband. Later, realizing what she had done, Alice attempted to cover up the crime by disposing of the body and making it seem like her husband had vanished. Alice, a former nurse familiar with human anatomy, had been taught by her husband how to dissect animal carcasses. They had the necessary tools at home, making the process of cutting up her husband's body a matter of technique. This gruesome task was carried out while their young daughter slept in the next room. However, Alice's testimony raised many doubts and questions from the start. Further investigation revealed that Alice received photos and videos of her husband's infidelity from a private detective on May 20th, after she had already killed him. She presented these to her husband's parents, claiming he had abandoned her for his mistress. A witness, Natasha Lima, testified in court that Marcos wanted a divorce but was afraid of Alice, describing her as mentally unstable and capable of terrible things. Natasha stated that the last time she saw Marcos, he complained about the constant family scandals and shared his plans to move to Florida after selling his company. He intended to start a new business and leave Alice behind, as he planned to divorce her and move on with his life. Experts made a disturbing discovery. There was blood in Marcos's lungs, indicating he was still alive and trying to breathe when his head was severed from his body. This contradicts Alice's claim that he died instantly from a bullet wound. Furthermore, the pathologist found that the bullet entered Marcos's head at an unusual angle, suggesting he was not expecting to be shot and made no attempt to defend himself. This finding contradicts Alice's account of Marcos attacking her and her need to defend herself. Most witnesses testified that Marcos, despite his difficult personality and hurtful words, never physically harmed anyone. It appears that Alice fabricated the episode, taking advantage of Marcos's inability to refute her claims. Ultimately, the court found Alice guilty of premeditated murder with extreme cruelty and attempting to cover up the crime. Alice Metsuniga received a 20-year prison sentence, a punishment many deemed too lenient for her crime. The victim's parents are now tasked with raising their granddaughter. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon was a vibrant and intelligent person who experienced a challenging time when her parents divorced at the age of 9. During this period, she took on a maternal role, caring for her 5 siblings and protecting them. Ashley's faith was the cornerstone of her life. As a devout Mormon and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, she turned to her faith in God for strength and comfort during difficult times. Her unwavering belief provided her with a sense of peace, resilience, and determination, enabling her to overcome obstacles and face challenges with courage. In 2003, while studying human development at Utah State, Ashley met Emmett, a philosophy student. Emmett, like Ashley, had experienced the pain of his parents' divorce at a young age. However, he found solace in the Mormon faith and was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints at 17. Ashley was immediately drawn to Emmett's charm, and he reciprocated her feelings. Emmett was immediately smitten with Ashley's intelligence when they first met, and he quickly realized she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. He confided in his closest friends about his feelings, and their relationship blossomed over the next few months. During Christmas in 2008, Emmett proposed to Ashley, and to his delight, she accepted. The couple tied the knot in a Mormon temple, surrounded by their shared values and beliefs. The ceremony was a beautiful expression of their commitment to each other and their faith. As newlyweds, Emmett and Ashley were filled with joy and excitement as they began their new life together. Their marriage was built on a foundation of stability and happiness, which is deeply rooted in Mormon values. In the Mormon faith, marriage is considered a sacred and eternal bond that transcends mortal life. While divorce is not entirely ruled out, it is strongly discouraged and only permitted under specific extreme circumstances. In 2005, Ashley and Emmett had twin daughters, and they were thrilled to start their journey as parents. Emmett loved being a father and cherished every moment with his girls. Ashley was happy to be living the life she always wanted. At the time, they were college students at Utah State University, and they managed to balance school with taking care of their babies. Although they faced challenges, their faith and love for each other helped them overcome difficulties. With determination, They pushed through and worked towards a better future. In 2009, Emmett graduated from Utah State University with high honors, went to law school, and passed the bar exam, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. During this time, Ashley stayed at home to care for their growing family, while Emmett focused on building his career. Ashley Corgan took on the role of managing the household and raising their 4 young children. To outsiders, the Corgan family appeared to have a perfect life, a beautiful home, multiple kids, and a fulfilling career for Emmett. But beneath the surface, things were different. In August 2010, Emmett began to feel overwhelmed by the financial burden of providing for his family of 6. To remedy this, Emmett decided to start his own business, a criminal defense firm. Through a friend, he met Candy Hall, a reputable paralegal with experience in criminal law. The two met for lunch and got along well, leading Emmett to hire her for his firm. Candy was married to Robert Hall, a hard worker and devoted father. When Candy landed the job at Emmett's firm, she was initially thrilled, and her husband and children were happy for her. As the stress of building a business and raising their large family took its toll, Ashley noticed a change in her marriage to Emmett. He was overwhelmed by his responsibilities and saw a release by spending excessive time at the gym, often at inconvenient times that left Ashley to care for their 4 children alone. Despite their growing distance, Ashley and Emmett welcomed their 5th child, a son, on January 15, 2011. However, Emmett's behavior was different from when their other children were born. He began spending more and more time away from home, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley confided in her sister, expressing her genuine concern that Emmett's activities might be evidence of infidelity. Emmett's assistant, Candy Hall, was facing marital problems similar to Ashley's. Candy confided in a friend that her husband Rob was jealous of her working for the charming Emmett. The constant arguing was putting a strain on their relationship. On March 6, 2011, Ashley and Emmett celebrated their 7th wedding anniversary, but Emmett didn't join her. Instead, he claimed to be at a bodybuilding competition, leaving Ashley to take care of their children by herself. Ashley felt anxious about her marriage, wondering if she was to blame for Emmett's unhappiness. Since divorce wasn't an option, she decided to work on improving their relationship. With a fresh resolve on March 11th, Ashley aimed to restore unity to her home. Ashley was determined to repair her strained relationship with her husband Emmett. She spent the entire day planning a perfect evening, attending to every detail to make it special. She cooked his favorite meal, tidied the house, and reminded the children to be on their best behavior. Ashley set the table and waited for Emmett to arrive home from work at 6 p.m. However, he walked in 2 hours late. When she tried to greet him with a kiss, he turned away, leaving her feeling cold. Despite his aloofness and the growing distance between them, Ashley was resolute in her mission to rekindle Emmett's love for her. She firmly believed that their love was worth fighting for, and was willing to do whatever it took to salvage their relationship. 2 hours after she had finished preparing dinner, the family finally gathered around the table to eat. But to Ashley's dismay, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry. Ashley prepared a meal for her husband Emmett, but he showed little interest, leaving her disappointed and hurt. When he claimed he needed to go to Walgreens, Ashley sensed something was wrong and asked him to stay and talk. Emmett responded harshly and left, leaving Ashley confused and hurt. Meanwhile, Emmett's assistant, Candy, was going through a tough time in her marriage to Rob Hall. That same day, Rob decided to pack his bags and leave their home, marking the end of their relationship. Rob had a strong bond with his loved ones, but he needed space. One evening, Rob asked his daughter if she'd borrowed his ex-wife Candy's car. She said no. Later, she drove past Walgreens, saw Candy's car, and called her dad to let him know. Rob's casual response hit a profound impact on 2 families. Ashley lay awake in bed, her heart filled with worry as she prayed for her marriage to succeed. Despite her efforts to reach him, Emmett wasn't responding to her texts and calls, causing her great unease. Her instincts told her something was wrong, and she felt a sense of dread. Meanwhile, at around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in the Walgreens parking lot. The police responded quickly, unsure of what they would find. They didn't know if it was a random shooting, a botched drug deal, a robbery, or something else. As the first officer approached the scene, he was met with a disturbing sight. A lifeless body on the ground, and another person, wounded and clutching their head in pain. The injured person was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound, leaving the police with many unanswered questions. Amidst the chaos, the police were wanted to speak with one woman in particular, Candy Hall, who was present at the crime scene. Candy identified the man in the hospital as her husband Rob, and the deceased man as her boss Emmett. Emmett had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Shortly after Emmett's body was discovered in the Walgreens parking lot, his wife Ashley received a knock on her door. When she answered, police officers broke the devastating news to her. Her husband Emmett was dead, a victim of a shooting. Ashley was shocked and distraught, unable to fathom what had led to this tragic event. The police then asked Ashley if she was familiar with Rob and Candy Hall. Ashley revealed that she knew Candy as Emmett's assistant, but she had long suspected that the two were having an affair. The police brought Candy in for questioning at the station, determined to piece together the events leading up to Emmett's murder and Rob's shooting. During the interrogation, Candy denied having a romantic relationship with her boss Emmett, and she vehemently rejected any suggestion of intimate relations. According to Candy, she had driven to Walgreens that night solely to pick up a prescription. Candy and Emmett met by chance in a store and decided to take a drive in Emmett's car. During the drive, Candy's phone rang. It was her estranged husband Rob. Candy told Rob she was with Emmett, which sparked Rob's jealousy and led to him making a violent threat against Emmett. After the phone call, Candy and Emmett stopped at a gas station and eventually arrived at Walgreens. When they got out of the car, Candy saw Rob waiting for them, visibly angry. The situation escalated into a heated argument and physical fight between Rob and Emmett. Amidst the chaos, Candy heard 3 loud gunshots and turned to see both men on the ground. She saw a gun lying nearby, picked it up and threw it away. When questioned by detectives, Candy claimed she didn't know who fired the first shots. Rob, who suffered a superficial gunshot wound to the head, was treated at the hospital and then interviewed by detectives. He told them that the gun found at the scene was his, and that it fell out of his pocket during the fight with Emmett at Walgreens. According to Rob, Emmett dove for the gun, and they struggled over it, resulting in Emmett shooting him in the head. Rob claimed he didn't know who shot Emmett during the struggle. The detectives weren't surprised that Rob didn't remember much due to his head wound from the gunshot. However, they did wonder if Emmett had fired the first shot, considering he ended up dead. To get to the bottom of the incident, which occurred in the Walgreens parking lot, the detectives checked the security footage. Upon reviewing the footage, they saw Rob Hall arrive at the parking lot at 9:55 p.m. 1 minute later, he entered the Walgreens store, rushing through each aisle as if searching for someone. The footage then showed Rob leaving the store at 10:06 p.m. and parking his car beside the candy section, where he waited for several minutes. 10 minutes after the shooting, Emmett's truck appeared on security footage as it pulled into the parking lot, but the shooting itself wasn't caught on camera. Although Candy, Emmett's assistant, initially denied having a romantic relationship with her boss, co-workers whispered that they were more than just colleagues. In fact, co-workers often saw Candy and Rob spending time together in Rob's office, with the door closed. Just 3 weeks after she started her job, detectives made a surprising discovery. Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss divorcing Rob. During their investigation, crime scene investigators searched Emmett's vehicle and found steroids in the glove compartment. This didn't surprise many of Emmett's loved ones, as he was obsessed with bodybuilding and had been acting strangely, leading them to suspect he was using steroids. When Candy gave her statement to the detectives, she described a distinctive pattern of gunshots that suggested Rob had shot and killed Emmett twice before turning the gun on himself. This evidence was enough for the detectives to obtain an arrest warrant for Rob Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. Rob was arrested and charged with Emmett's murder. The consequences of Rob's actions were severe. If convicted, he faced life in prison without parole or the death penalty. As the trial approached, Ashley, Emmett's wife, hoped it would bring her some closure. She believed that understanding her husband's infidelity and death would help her heal. Prosecutors argued that Rob was angry at Emmett for having an affair with Candy and blamed Emmett for ruining his marriage. According to the prosecution, Rob shot Emmett and then killed himself. However, Rob's defense team told a different story. They claimed Emmett was the aggressor on the night he died, and that he had a history of steroid abuse. They alleged that during the altercation, Emmett grabbed Rob's gun and shot Rob before Rob regained possession and killed Emmett in self-defense. One of the key witnesses in Rob's trial was his wife, Candy. Her testimony differed slightly from her initial statement to the police. Instead of hearing 2 rapid gunshots followed by another, she claimed to have heard a pop, followed by 2 more rapid pops. This new version of events supported the defense's argument that Emmett shot Rob first. To prove Rob was the shooter, prosecutors presented forensic evidence that the type of weapon used in the parking lot shooting left significant gunshot residue, GSR, after firing. Investigators tested Rob and Emmett for GSR and found that Rob's left palm had 32 particles, his right palm had 23, while Emmett had only 1 particle on his left hand and none on his right. The forensic evidence proved that Rob was the one who fired the gun 3 times, and Emmett never possessed the weapon. After careful consideration, the jury found Rob Hall not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder, which means the murder was not premeditated. The judge sentenced Rob to 30 years in prison. Rob will be eligible for parole in 2028 when he is 58 years old. Despite the conviction, Rob maintains his innocence and appealed his conviction in 2021, but the Idaho Supreme Court denied him a retrial. 2 months after Emmett's murder, Candy Hall was arrested and charged with embezzlement for allegedly stealing money from her previous employer. This charge was unrelated to Emmett's murder. Candy pleaded guilty and was sentenced to imprisonment, released on parole in 2014, and remains on probation until 2026. In an interview, Candy expressed deep feelings of guilt over the incident, mainly due to its impact on her relationships with her children. She hopes to prove to them that it was a regrettable mistake. Ashley struggled to come to terms with her husband's murder by his lover's husband. In a 2015 interview, she faced Candy Hall for the first time. Despite her emotional pain, Ashley decided to move on and create a new life. She moved out of town with their 5 children, who gradually adjusted to the change and found joy again. Ashley eventually remarried, had 2 more children, and now blogs for victims of trends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. She was the middle child of 3, along with her siblings Maris Al Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Tragically, Maria's mother passed away when she was young, leaving her to take on a significant caregiving role for her brothers. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, a nursing student who was 11 years older than her. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. After their wedding, they relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Joel landed a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Their new financial stability allowed them to live a life of luxury, complete with expensive cars and exotic vacations. By the time Maria was 31, she had left her job to focus on raising their 2 young sons. As a devoted stay-at-home mom, Maria cherished every moment with her children, and supported her husband Joel, who was 40 at the time. Maria was a devoted mother who spent quality time with her children, taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. She also made time for her own interests, like playing the piano. Despite her happiness at home, she harbored a long-held dream of returning to school and becoming a nurse again. From the outside, it seemed like Maria and her husband Pellet had a perfect relationship. He would frequently share photos of his family with friends and colleagues, boasting about how wonderful they were. However, beneath the surface, things started to take a turn in 2018, after Maria gave birth to their second son. Those close to Pellet began to notice a change in his behavior. Pellet underwent a physical transformation, losing weight and gaining muscle. He also became more outgoing and flirtatious with other women, behavior that didn't align with what was expected of a married man. On social media, he started removing photos of his wife and children, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This new online persona made it seem like he was single and carefree, without the responsibilities of a husband and father. In 2020, Maria's life was turned upside down when she discovered her husband, Pellet, was having an affair with a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. Despite her suspicions, finding airline tickets he had purchased for a trip to Europe with his mistress was the final confirmation of his infidelity. Maria was consumed by heartbreak, depression, and a deep sense of betrayal. She felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the fact that her 10-year marriage was built on lies. To cope with her emotional turmoil, Maria began seeing a therapist who prescribed medication to support her mental health. As Maria grappled with her emotions, she found solace in writing journals, using them as an outlet to process her thoughts and feelings. However, the situation continued to deteriorate, and on September 19, 2020, Maria confronted her husband's infidelity head-on by visiting Janet's house, where she found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet at his house, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. He chose Janet, and during the ensuing argument, Janet called the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left by the time the police arrived. The police then called Maria while she was driving with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. When they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, displaying a concerning level of force and anger. The next morning, Maria sent Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their situation. Pellet replied, suggesting they handle things without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. However, just a few hours later, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an emotional email expressing his deep sadness and inner turmoil. He requested a sincere and calm conversation with Maria, free from arguments. Maria agreed to meet with him, and they scheduled a meeting for 5 p.m. the following night. Before meeting her friend Yasmin Martinez, Maria was extremely anxious and messaged her about their plans. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. On September 22, 2020, Maria's husband, Pellet, frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken some prescription pills and was not breathing. Officer crews arrived at their house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the scene. Pellet was found performing CPR on Maria at the top of the stairs near their bedroom, still wearing his green hospital scrubs. Their 2 sons were sleeping nearby. When paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts while first responders worked to save Maria's life. An officer asked Pellet about the pills Maria had supposedly taken. He quickly retrieved a bottle from the nearby bathroom medicine cabinet and handed it to the officers. The bottle was later found to contain a prescription for clonazepam, a medication used to treat acute anxiety, panic attacks, and epilepsy. Benzodiazepines, like Kazam, calm the nervous system to produce a relaxing effect. However, when an officer examined the pill bottle, he discovered that it was prescribed to Pellet, not Maria. What caught his attention was that the bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet. which is unusual in overdose cases, where the bottle is typically found near the person. The officer's body camera footage showed Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket. This raised suspicions, as it seemed like Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious finding was a needle catheter on the stairs, which was unusual given the presence of 2 young children in the home. The investigators found even more disturbing evidence: syringes and IV equipment neatly packed in a medical bag. While Pellet's profession as an anesthesia nurse might explain the possession of these tools, their presence outside a clinical setting sparked important questions for the investigators. Pellet told the officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression and her mental health had been declining. He said she had taken pills to cope with her emotions, but unfortunately, despite the responders' best efforts, she couldn't be revived and was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria's death, the officers questioned Pellet further in the kitchen. He stated that he and Maria had a conversation earlier that day, became intimate, and then he took a shower. When he came out, he found Maria asleep. Pellet went downstairs for an unspecified reason, and when he returned, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. The officers observed Pellet's strange behavior, including excessive sweating and his inability to answer simple questions about the incident. The officer noticed that Pellet was sweating excessively, more so than anyone else, including the first responder who had been trying to revive Maria for 2 hours. This heightened suspicion and led to him being taken to the police station for further questioning by Sergeant Liz Mata. At the station, Pellet was left alone in an interrogation room, which was being recorded by video cameras. When officers reviewed the footage, they were astonished to see Pellet's sudden outburst. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. The commotion was so intense that people in the nearby hallways and rooms were frightened by the loud noises coming from the room. As a result, Sergeant Louis Matt entered the room at 4 a.m. to speak with Pellet. During their conversation, Pellet opened up again about the events surrounding Maria's death. In a shocking revelation, Pellet also confessed to having an affair with a woman named Janet. He revealed that he had left the family home 5 months prior and was living with Janet at the time of Maria's death. He shared that he had been involved with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair beforehand. On the night Maria died, her husband visited their family home to talk to her about their marriage. After their conversation, they were intimate. He thought she had fallen asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. The husband confessed to the officer that he had given Maria clonazepam, a medication prescribed to him to help with her anxiety and depression. However, he couldn't provide details about how many pills she had taken or how many were left in the bottle. Despite being questioned, the husband was unable to provide any additional information to help clarify what had happened. He was released, and an autopsy was performed on Maria just 8 hours after her death. The timing of the autopsy meant that any cause of death should still be detectable in her stomach contents. However, the autopsy results revealed a surprise. No traces of pills were found in Maria's stomach. Instead, the medical examiner discovered a small red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow, which suggested that she may have been injected with something. The discovery of the mysterious mark on Maria's hand led investigators to explore its potential connection to her death. During their investigation, they found a journal in Maria's home, which she had kept to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, revealing Maria's innermost thoughts and experiences. Investigators learned that Maria loved her husband dearly and wanted to preserve their family, despite his desire to be with someone else. She expressed her desperation to escape her emotional pain, writing, "I want it to stop. My past haunts me, and I don't want to be sad anymore." Through her journal entries, Maria documented the heartbreak she felt when her husband left their home in Laredo, leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. The journal, along with recordings on her cell phone, exposed her husband's abusive behavior and chronicled her emotional journey from grief to healing, and eventually, a newfound optimism for the future. Maria Munoz wrote in her journal the day before her death, "What is it that I want? Number 1, move forward." Her journal entries revealed a strong desire to live and move forward with her life, with no mention of suicide or plans to end her life. This led investigators to rule out suicide as a possible cause of death, and they continued to search for answers. Dr. John Hunsinger, Maria's previous employer and an anesthesiologist, became aware of the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective Cruz. Dr. Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators conducted. In January 2021, the toxicology test results were finally received by investigators Sergeant Luis Matt and Cruz. Contrary to Maria's boyfriend Pellet's claim, Maria did not have clonazepam in her system. The report revealed a surprising discovery: the presence of 7 surgical drugs including morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Lian, and Narin. These medications are typically used during surgical procedures, with propofol and ketamine often administered intravenously as sedatives and for pain management. The investigation into Maria's death took a significant turn when toxicology results revealed high levels of propofol in her system. This was shocking because propofol is a highly controlled substance, typically only accessible to medical professionals working in anesthesiology. As a nurse anesthetist, Pellet would have had access to propofol, leading investigators to suspect him. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Pellet and had experience with propofol, was stunned by the extreme amount found in Maria's body, the highest he had ever seen. Given Pellet's profession, investigators believed he would know the exact dosage required to sedate or overdose someone. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested she may have been injected with a substance. With the toxicology report, Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal, authorities felt they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for Maria's murder. They quickly obtained an arrest warrant, and De La Cruz went to apprehend Pellet, who surprisingly did not resist. He was taken into custody, marking a new phase in the investigation. As police prepared to question him about Maria's death, Pellet would finally face the consequences of his actions. The trial began on March 21, 2023. During the legal proceedings, both the prosecution and defense presented their arguments. The prosecution team, an all-female group referred to as Maria's team, used Maria Munoz's personal journal entries to build a strong case against the defendant Pellet. This evidence helped to portray Maria as a devoted wife and mother to the jury. Prosecutors portrayed Maria as a loving, intelligent, and vibrant individual, evident through her personal journal. They alleged that her husband, Pellet, drugged her by slipping substances into her drink, causing her to become unconscious. While she was incapacitated, they claimed he injected propofol into her arm. The prosecutors also suspected that Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, ensuring that emergency responders would be unable to revive Maria upon arrival. The prosecutors believed Maria's journals provided insight into the challenges she faced, fueling their determination to seek justice for her. During the final arguments, Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, claimed his client wanted to reconcile with Maria before her death. Bali pointed to the medical examiner's report, which stated that Maria's cause of death remained uncertain, and argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove Pellet's responsibility in her death. Bali highlighted a crucial detail. Pellet had given Maria a drug called Narin, commonly used to reverse overdoses, on the night she died. Bali also revealed that both Pellet and Munoz struggled with drug addiction. Furthermore, he argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of force on her body. However, an investigation into Maria's social circles, friends, and family revealed that she was not a drug addict. In fact, Pellet was the only person who could have supplied her with the large amount of propofol found in her system. The authorities managed to convince Pellet's girlfriend, surgical nurse Janet Arredondo, to testify against him. She disclosed that Pellet had admitted to giving Maria something to calm her down and confirmed that he had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury delivered a verdict in under an hour, finding Pellet guilty of murdering his wife, Maria, after a 9-day trial on March 30th, 2023. On April 27th, 2023, Pellet received a life sentence for the murder conviction, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. As of now, Joel Pellet is serving his life sentence at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice, facing the consequences of his heinous actions. His imprisonment serves as a testament to accountability and a tribute to Maria's life, ensuring that her memory is honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Joel Pellet's brutal act of killing his wife, Maria Munoz, is not entirely clear. However, according to the prosecution, it is believed that he was driven by a desire to end his marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Arredondo. Regardless of the motive, Pellet's actions were inexcusable and justice had to be served. The jury's verdict has brought a sense of closure to this tragic case, confirming that heinous crimes like this will not be tolerated. The conviction serves as a powerful reminder that those who commit such atrocities will face the full weight of the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chris Watts. Shanann Razuchek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3rd, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shanann and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her co-worker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response, because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shanann and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shanann or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shanann hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shanann might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shanann and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shanann during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shanann, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shanann. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shanann and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shannan's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shanann was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shanann emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shannan's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shannan's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shannan's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was a lively and cheerful child who loved making people laugh with her humor, impressions, and playful antics. She had a special bond with her pet frog, which she'd often take on walks around town. Mary was an outdoorsy person who enjoyed exploring nature and appreciating its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, often putting on shows for her family that showcased her creativity and imagination. Her family saw great potential in her and thought she had a bright future ahead. As she grew older, Mary developed a strong interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and appreciated their power. She became a skilled marksman and continued to develop her skills. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who would become the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he grew up with his parents and brother. He had a happy childhood, surrounded by a loving family and many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature. Stephen was particularly close to his parents, but he shared a special bond with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her achievement. In the letter, he praised her hard work and determination, saying he looked up to her every day and loved her more than words could say. Stephen had immense respect and appreciation for his mother, which was clear in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine formed a strong bond, united by their passion for outdoor activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the foundation of their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own space thrilled Mary Catherine and Stephen. What's more, Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine into their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner, a tradition that brought them all closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends were initially hesitant about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they got to know her better, they began to appreciate her positive influence on Stephen's life. They saw how happy and joyful she made him, and they admired her enthusiasm for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine had different occupations. Stephen worked as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, on the other hand, had two part-time jobs. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. Additionally, she was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, was also a colleague of Mary Catherine's at the sporting goods shop. Mary Catherine learned about basic gun safety while working at a sporting goods store, which taught her how to properly hold, load, and shoot a gun. Similarly, Stephen was enthusiastic about firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles that he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for self-protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia, by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a tragic turn on August 1st when Mary Catherine made a distressing 911 call, marking the end of their high school romance. Mary Catherine frantically called the dispatcher, screaming that she had accidentally just shot her boyfriend. The police quickly responded to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Mary Catherine and Stephen. They found Mary Catherine in a state of panic, crying and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's motionless body. She repeatedly wailed that she could not lose him, her voice filled with anguish and desperation. As the police carefully moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but miraculously, he was still alive. The police immediately called for an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. At the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked to save Stephen's life. Despite their best efforts, his condition continued to worsen. Unfortunately, the severity of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was taken to the hospital, Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the station for a formal interview. Mary Catherine explained what happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She said she was giving him the gun because he normally kept it beside his bed for safety. However, she clarified that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. During the police questioning, officers detected the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her for more information, her story changed. Initially, she said she handed Stephen the gun, but later claimed she tossed it to him. The police was skeptical of her changing story, knowing that a gun wouldn't fire randomly just because it was tossed. Someone had to pull the trigger. The police investigation revealed that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at Stephen's body for the bullet to have struck where it did, given the location of his gunshot wound. During her interview, Mary Catherine admitted, "I did it out of anger." But unfortunately, the recording equipment malfunctioned at that exact moment, and her words were inaudible. Despite the missing recording, the police still had strong evidence pointing to Mary Catherine's intention to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, they found signs of an intense argument, including scattered food throughout the house. Additionally, police records showed that officers had responded to 5 domestic disturbance calls at the couple's residence in the past year. The police also discovered that the gun used in the shooting was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. These findings collectively led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. The police found cooking grease residue on the gun and magazine, leading them to believe Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police questioned his friends to learn more about their relationship. According to his friends, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship was marked by constant fighting and toxicity. They reported that the couple frequently had intense, heated arguments. Mary Catherine was described as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that heightened the tension between them. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would barrage him with relentless texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One of Stephen's friends revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's history of threatening him with a gun. Specifically, she had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. Despite this, Stephen chose not to report these incidents to the authorities because he was worried about Mary Catherine getting into trouble. Stephen's friends stressed that his top priority was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it put his own safety at risk. When Stephen's friends learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, they were skeptical because they knew she was knowledgeable about handling firearms. In fact, just 3 months prior to the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was running wild outside, screaming and attempting to shoot both him and herself. Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the latest time, her eyes frightened him, making him think she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her. In July, Stephen planned to secretly move to another town while Mary Catherine was out, without telling her. He was afraid of how she might react if she knew he was leaving. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, the police found a series of revealing text messages from July 30th. The conversation started with Stephen sending Mary Catherine a friendly message. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen replied, "You too. Love you." However, the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's texts and calls, as they were in the middle of a fight, and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who told her that he was with his friend. Angry and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to his friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up alongside and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down, promising to come home soon. Although Stephen's friends claimed that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at Stephen on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine vigorously denied these allegations. She maintained that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her insight, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen was afraid that Mary Catherine would follow through on her threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged at her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't tell the police her version of events because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence towards her. She claimed that Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled an incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive towards Stephen, stating that she had slapped him hard in the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her account of their relationship, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When questioned, Mary Catherine confided in her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a murder, the authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and firearm possession during a felony. The prosecution offered her a plea deal, proposing a life sentence with possible parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine declined the offer, opting to stand trial and assert her innocence. At the trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she shot Stephen in self-defense, denying the charges against her. The trial, which began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, exposed the tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the victim of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior, which included physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She described being hit, humiliated, and degraded by Stephen on multiple occasions, and shared specific incidents where he smacked her around and verbally abused her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's constant threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearful for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. She presented evidence in the form of text messages, including one where Stephen threatened to punish her, which she said meant he would physically harm her. Another text message showed Stephen's explicit threat to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense team also presented messages that supported her allegations of sexual assault, including a text where Stephen mentioned his red room, which she described as a place where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including one after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World, where he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and intensified his efforts instead. The defense presented over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen, which showcased his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening behavior towards Mary Catherine. These messages included disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish, accompanied by the caption, "This is you." Another message showed Stephen's violent threats towards Mary Catherine after she cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also alleged that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine maintained that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night she shot him were a result of her desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, causing her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She said the last thing she had told him before shooting was to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's allegations, describing Stephen as a friendly and caring person. Stephen's mother said she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not condone such behavior. Although she acknowledged that Stephen may have said some angry things, she believed he did not mean them. In court, the prosecution questioned Mary Catherine about her story, pointing out that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also presented evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit content online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was to find ways to make Stephen happy. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had changed her story about the shooting multiple times, and that a text from Stephen suggested she had pointed a gun at him before. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior towards him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Mary Catherine not guilty of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict surprised Stephen's loved ones, who felt that justice had not been served. Later, the jurors revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally killed Stephen, but there was not enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh attempted to follow in his family's footsteps by pursuing a law degree from the University of North Carolina, where he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Branton. They started dating in 1991 and got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex joined his family's law firm, PMPD, as a personal injury attorney, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, unlike his ancestors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, covering up financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, Alex's dishonest dealings went unnoticed until his youngest son, Paul, was involved in a fatal boating accident. This incident was the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Murdaugh family, leading people to speculate that these accidents were not coincidental and were instead part of a larger cover-up, given the family's history and resources. Here's what happened on February 23, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, fresh out of high school, took his family's boat to Pucas Island for a party with friends. The group, including his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, and Miley Allman, wanted an unsupervised night of fun. They planned a house party and oyster roast on the island. To make the night complete, Paul used his older brother's ID to buy beer and hard liquor. They left the Murdaugh River House around 7 p.m. and continued partying until midnight. Feeling restless, Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and his friend Connor had 2 rounds of shots at around 1 a.m. As they headed back to the boat, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. Paul, who was heavily intoxicated, started acting strangely on a boat ride with friends. At 1:15 a.m., The group got back on the water, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Paul drove the boat in circles, showing signs of intoxication, and got into an argument with the others. Anthony wanted to get out on a nearby rock, but Paul refused. GPS footage later showed that the boat's speed increased at some point. Although Paul denied deliberately speeding up, he was in control of the wheel. The boat crashed into Arrow Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., throwing Mallory into the water. The others were severely injured. Connor broke his jaw, and Morgan's hand was badly hurt. Connor called 911, and help arrived soon after. When the deputy sheriff arrived, he saw blood in the main compartment and a large split in the hull from the impact. All the teenagers involved were extremely drunk, and everyone except Anthony required hospital treatment. Paul refused treatment despite being extremely agitated and having a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly higher than the legal limit. The search for Mallory's body took 8 days, and she was found to have died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitnesses stating that Paul was out of control while driving the boat, he was not arrested or charged. This led to rumors that Alex Murdaugh had used his influence to protect his son from justice. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was served with a wrongful death lawsuit. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware that her son was drunk when they went boating, and that Buster had helped them obtain fake IDs to buy alcohol. Paul was finally charged with 3 felonies on April 18, 2019, but he never made it to court because he died before his trial. A series of mysterious deaths have been linked to the Murdaugh family. One incident involved Stephen Smith, a gay teenager, who was found dead on July 8, 2015. His official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and it was initially ruled a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime. There were rumors that Stephen was in a relationship with Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, and that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper, died on February 26, 2018, due to complications from a severe head injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs had caused her to trip and fall, but there was no autopsy to confirm this account. The case was reopened on March 22, 2023, and it was revealed that Gloria's death was actually a murder, although no suspects have been named. Alex Murdaugh's family was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit after his housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, died in 2018. The lawsuit resulted in a $4.3 million insurance policy settlement, but the money never reached Satterfield's sons. Instead, Murdaugh allegedly conspired with his friend Corey Fleming, a lawyer and godfather to one of Murdaugh's sons, to steal the payout. The money was diverted to Murdaugh's bank account, and the Satterfield family was never notified. Satterfield's sons filed a new civil lawsuit against Murdaugh in September 2021. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Satterfield's death, citing inconsistencies in the coroner's report. The Satterfield family allowed authorities to exhume Satterfield's body for further investigation. Meanwhile, Murdaugh was facing numerous financial and embezzlement charges. He was allegedly involved in a money laundering and painkiller ring with his distant cousin Curtis Smith, which lasted from 2013 to 2021. On September 4, 2021, Murdaugh orchestrated a scheme in which Smith shot him in an attempt to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. However, the bullet only caused superficial injuries, and Murdaugh was able to call 911 himself. Days later, Murdaugh confessed to the scheme and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. He surrendered himself and was taken into custody. 2 days later, he announced his resignation from his family's law firm and entered rehab. However, it was soon revealed that Murdaugh had misappropriated $792,000 from his law firm. His law license was indefinitely suspended in September 2021. investigators continued to uncover numerous financial crimes, tax evasions, and embezzlements committed by Murdaugh. After leaving rehab, Murdaugh was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. He was denied bond and later indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing money from clients, lawyers, and the Satterfield family. Alex Murdaugh faced additional charges on December 9, 2021, with 21 new counts added to the existing 27, bringing the total to 48. The charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, breach of trust, and obtaining signature or property by false pretenses. It was estimated that Murdaugh had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into his business dealings took months, with new charges emerging almost daily. By June 2022, the charges against him had risen to 81, and by the time he was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. One of the victims' mothers filed a legal claim against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh, raising questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Could he be hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? What could have been his motive? The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLAD, revisited the double murder case, considering new information gathered during the investigation into Murdaugh's financial crimes. They discovered that Alex and Maggie Murdaugh's marriage was troubled, and Maggie was living apart from her husband at their beach home on Edisto Island. Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, told law enforcement that Maggie had not planned to see Alex on the night of the murders. Alex had asked Maggie to meet him at the family's hunting lodge, where she and her younger son were later found shot dead near the dog kennels. Alex claimed to have taken a long nap before leaving to visit his ailing mother, who suffered from dementia. He stated that he was away for 45 minutes to an hour and a half and found his wife and son dead upon his return. However, law enforcement suspected that Alex's timeline was questionable and lacked a clear motive for the murders. The investigation revealed that weeks before the murder, the state grand jury had subpoenaed Alex Murdaugh's finances, which threatened to expose his financial wrongdoings. Additionally, his law firm had discovered his misappropriation of company funds, and he was confronted about it on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities believed that the financial pressure had pushed Alex to hatch a plan to divert attention from his crimes and garner sympathy in the public eye. 13 months after the fatal shooting, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The prosecutor alleged that Murdaugh had shot and killed his wife and son at close range with a shotgun and an AR-style rifle. The murder weapons were never found. Murdaugh's defense team argued that 2 shooters were involved due to the different weapons used. Expert witness testimony suggested that the shooter was likely between 5'2" and 5'4" tall, which ruled out Alex Murdaugh as a suspect due to his 6'4" height. However, under cross-examination, the expert admitted that there were other possible explanations for the bullet trajectory beyond the shooter's height. The investigation revealed that Maggie was shot with 300 blackout ammunition from an AR-style rifle, and a box of this ammo was found at the Murdaugh family estate. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid accountability for his financial crimes. Alex's lawyers countered that this didn't make sense, as it would only shift attention to himself and put him in the spotlight of a murder investigation. Alex was a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but his lawyer claimed he had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murders and no motive to kill his family. Prosecutors presented 2 videos taken on the night of the murder, which appeared to show Alex wearing different shirts. The Snapchat video taken from Paul's phone showed Alex wearing a blue shirt, while the body cam footage showed him wearing a different shirt. Investigators couldn't find the blue shirt, and prosecutors suggested Alex tried to influence a key witness's account of what he was wearing. Cell phone data and testimony from Alex's mother's caregiver confirmed that Alex was only at his mother's home for 15 to 20 minutes, contradicting his claim of staying for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The most crucial piece of evidence was a video found on Paul's phone, recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders. The video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex, placing Alex at the scene of the crime. This contradicted his previous alibi and confirmed his presence at the dog kennels where the murders occurred. Alex testified that he didn't shoot his wife or son, but admitted to lying about his alibi. Alex Murdaugh changed his story, claiming that his opioid addiction and resulting paranoia led him to lie to law enforcement. However, prosecutors argued that Murdaugh fabricated this excuse after murdering his wife and son. They believed he used his wife's phone to create an alibi by making calls and sending texts, including, "Call me, babe," at 9:47 p.m. Phone data showed that Murdaugh's and his wife's phones locked simultaneously, and Alex's phone recorded a sudden increase in steps around the time of the murder. Prosecutors suggested this was evidence of him trying to hide or dispose of evidence, but his lawyers disputed this, pointing out that the step patterns on Alex's phone did not match his wife's. The decisive evidence came from a video recorded at the dog kennels. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found Murdaugh guilty on all counts on March 2, 2023. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Additionally, he received a 5-year sentence for possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Murdaugh pleaded guilty to 22 financial crimes as part of a deal, but maintains his innocence in the murders. He appealed his conviction on March 9, 2023. In a surprise move, his lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, alleging that Rebecca Hill, a court clerk, had engaged in jury tampering. Hill denies the allegations, which include advising jurors to disregard Murdaugh's testimony and other defense evidence, pressuring them to reach a quick guilty verdict, and misrepresenting critical information to the trial judge. A hearing is scheduled for Murdaugh's lawyers to present evidence and witnesses to support their claim. However, a judge has not yet been assigned to preside over the hearing. With over 100 financial and drug crime charges pending, as well as multiple lawsuits, it is clear that the Alex Murdaugh case is far from over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and grew up with 3 loving sisters. His parents provided him with an adventurous upbringing, allowing him to attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan's good looks, charming features, and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After completing high school, he attended Indiana University, where he excelled in his studies, graduating with honors in 2005 with a triple major in political science, history, and geography. Following in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. His ultimate goal was to run a successful law firm, providing fair and competent legal representation to those who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin, Carissa, for support. During this time, he regularly visited her in Lexington, Kentucky, where he met Shayna Hubers, a native of the city. Shayna was a charming and lively individual with a warm personality that drew people to her. Despite their 8-year age difference, their mutual attraction grew stronger with each visit Ryan made to Lexington. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Shayna began to spend more weekends in Highland Heights, where Ryan lived, taking care of him and cooking for him. However, their promising future came to a devastating end on October 12, 2012. In a distressing 911 call, Shayna revealed that she had just killed her boyfriend Ryan. She described a harrowing scene of domestic violence that had escalated out of control, claiming that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her and confronted her with a gun. According to Shayna, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting Ryan, and then shot him several more times, believing she was putting him out of his misery. Within minutes of Shayna's call, officers arrived at the scene, responding to the shocking tragedy. When police officers arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually complied. As she walked out, the officers told her to lie down on the ground. Shayna was clearly upset as she followed their instructions. After handcuffing her and putting her in the patrol car, the officers went into the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. The crime scene investigators found that the apartment was slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. The investigators learned that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned guns, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic that Shayna used to shoot him. From the evidence, they determined that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna shot him. They knew this because of the blood on the table. However, the fact that many items on the table were undisturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The investigators searched the apartment thoroughly, while other officers canvassed the neighborhood, looking for additional information. One neighbor, Nikki, provided valuable information to the detective. Nikki knew Shayna well and believed that Ryan didn't return Shayna's dedication to him. According to Nikki, they frequently argued, often disturbing the peace. Months earlier, Nikki recalled an incident where Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna claimed that Ryan had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, injuring her. Nikki encouraged Shayna to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna chose not to. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about shooting Ryan. Before questioning her, they read her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shayna exercised this right and requested an attorney. However, she chose to talk to the detectives despite this. When asked about the victim, Shayna replied, "The man I killed," which showed a sense of detachment. She claimed she acted in self-defense, saying Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment. Shayna described the night as surreal and out of body. Later in the interview, she added that Ryan had said mean things to her, taunting her while holding a gun, and that he was under the influence of drugs. Shayna maintained that she shot Ryan because she believed he was going to kick her out of his condo. She said she picked up the gun and shot him once, and then shot him several more times after seeing him twitch. During her confession, Shayna revealed that Ryan was vain and wanted a nose job, so she shot him in the face to grant his wish. During the intense questioning, Shayna revealed her worries about her schoolwork and how having a dead boyfriend would affect her future relationships. She was specifically concerned that no one would want to marry her once they found out she had killed her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective listened to her statement, but ultimately arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared genuinely surprised by her arrest, claiming she had acted in self-defense when she shot him. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, filling the courtroom with anticipation. The prosecutor started by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases added to the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited for the verdict. The prosecutor believed that Shayna was obsessed with her ex-boyfriend Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. Ryan's friends testified that he wanted to end their relationship and was avoiding Shayna's calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna would often show up uninvited at Ryan's condo in Highland Heights. On the night Ryan was murdered, the prosecution presented evidence that he had a date planned with Audrey Bolt, a former beauty queen. The prosecution suggested that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that Ryan stood her up on the night of the murder. She had no idea he had been shot and killed until later. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had told his father he wanted to break up with Shayna, and his father advised him to be kind to her to avoid a messy breakup. However, Ryan and Shayna exchanged texts on the day of the murder, with Ryan telling her he didn't want to see her. Despite this, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited. The prosecution believed that during an argument, Ryan told Shayna he was done with her and that she could no longer control him. This allegedly enraged Shayna, who then picked up a gun and shot Ryan. The prosecution played a video of Shayna's police interrogation, which they claimed showed her to be a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shayna appears carefree and unemotional, which the prosecution argued was inconsistent with someone who had just killed in self-defense. However, this interpretation was open to interpretation by the jury. The defense argued that Ryan was acting erratically and violently on the night of the murder due to drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines. The autopsy results showed that these drugs were present in Ryan's system. The defense claimed that Shayna shot Ryan in self-defense. The evidence suggested that the substances he was using influenced his actions. To support this idea, Shayna's lawyers called an expert in toxicology to testify on her behalf. The expert stated that a combination of anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. The defense presented this expert testimony to create a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, questioning whether she had intentionally meant to harm anyone. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became worried that the jury might be swayed by Shayna's self-defense claim, particularly because she was smart, young, and attractive. These fears were alleviated on April 23 when the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. However, at the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his own death, which outraged his friends and family. Shayna claimed she was innocent throughout the trial and refused to take responsibility for her actions, despite the evidence against her. In Kentucky, defendants who are victims of domestic violence may be eligible for reduced parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge didn't believe Shayna qualified for this reduced parole, citing that her crime was a premeditated murder. As a result, Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison, making her eligible for parole in 17 years, at the age of 41 in 2032. After her sentencing, Shayna appealed for a new trial, which was granted in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which they had concealed. This violated Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, Shayna's second trial for Ryan Poston's murder began, 4 months later than expected. Her defense attorney presented opening arguments, stating that during her year-and-a-half relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their relationship suffered as a result. The defense attorney claimed that on the night Shayna met Ryan, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting impact on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to his messages afterwards. Additionally, the defense team argued that Shayna had a history of trauma, stemming from a sexual assault she experienced in high school. This led to her struggles with alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They claimed that this traumatic experience contributed to her behavior on the night of Ryan's murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shayna's defense team claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence by Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. They argued that her actions were a result of years of abuse, not driven by revenge or financial gain. The defense pointed out that Ryan constantly belittled Shayna about her weight and breast size, making her feel insecure and inadequate. This, they said, contributed to her low self-esteem. The defense also stated that Shayna and Ryan's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. They claimed that Ryan's desire for a more intimate connection was unfulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had received a treatment to improve her romantic life. They claimed that she got this treatment to address sexual problems in their relationship and strengthen their bond. The defense argued that Ryan's consistent lack of interest and rejection made things worse, causing Shayna to become more and more frustrated and disconnected from him. The defense claimed that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to pursue relationships with other women. However, the prosecution clarified that they were not trying to portray Ryan as a perfect partner, but rather as someone who was not abusive. The prosecution argued that Shayna did not kill Ryan in self-defense, but rather because he had finally ended their toxic relationship on the night of the shooting. They believed Ryan had every reason to break up with Shayna, as she continued to harass him even after their previous breakups. Despite Ryan's efforts to end the relationship, Shayna consistently returned. The prosecution saw this as evidence of Shayna's inability to let go of the relationship. A friend of Ryan's testified that this breakup was different, as Ryan had never had the courage to end things with Shayna in person before, implying that this time, the breakup would be permanent. Ryan accused Shayna of trying to hold on to him. To support this claim, the prosecution presented texts where Shayna told her friends that the romantic interactions with Ryan had brought them closer. However, Shayna testified in her own defense, contradicting Ryan's claim. She said that their romantic interactions had actually driven them apart. In a separate text exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but he declined due to the side effects of his antidepressant medication, which had reduced his libido. Despite these conflicting accounts, Shayna testified that Ryan had forcibly had sex with her. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury again found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan, despite the contradictory testimonies and evidence. The jury confirmed their original verdict, and during the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's remarkable singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she asked the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, emphasizing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact others' lives. Shayna's mother made it clear that her plea did not diminish the profound grief and pain experienced by the family of Ryan Poston. Despite her mother's emotional appeal, Shayna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to the sentence, Shayna must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates, but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to they noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So, when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "He proposed. Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first dance, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody cancelled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his co-worker Cameron Fredrickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to visit Cody's new house, which he had purchased with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking with no response, Cameron let himself in and searched the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, "Hello, Jordan. My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email and it said Cody was gone." Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police and she did, but I was rushing her, saying, "Go, move, what are you doing?" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient, at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction, or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was strangely chipper during the entire drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they went. Despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark wondering why on earth Cody would be in that location. It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all. The autopsy revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stallcup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange, in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day, and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address Carmen Tony 67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident, and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying that she was more concerned about herself than mourning Cody's death. Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family, and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jacqueline Vandergriff. Born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas, Jacqueline "Jackie" Vandergriff was the younger of 2 daughters. She grew up in the Colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by her loving family. Before she could even walk, Jackie demonstrated a natural talent for gymnastics by learning to somersault. This early start sparked a passion that would drive her future success. Recognizing her potential, her parents enrolled her in gymnastics classes at just 3 years old. As she grew, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. Those who knew Jackie described her as a kind and empathetic person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about others and was a loyal friend who inspired those around her to be their best selves. Her presence brought comfort and joy to everyone she met, whether through words of encouragement or simply being a listening ear. Jackie's kindness knew no bounds, extending far beyond her human relationships to encompass a deep love for all living beings. A lifelong vegetarian, she was a fierce supporter of pet adoption from no-kill shelters and had a special place in her heart for animals. In her free time, Jackie was an avid reader and found solace in the magical world of Harry Potter, her favorite book series. Music was another one of her passions, with an eclectic taste that ranged from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. She was especially fond of musicals, with Rent being her absolute favorite. She would attend every performance that came to town. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie decided to pursue her passion for beauty by enrolling in the Paul Mitchell School for Cosmetology. Jackie Vandergriff pursued her passion for beauty and wellness by becoming a licensed esthetician. She then took her education to the next level by enrolling at Texas Women's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. Her goal was to help others understand the importance of good nutrition and make healthy lifestyle choices. With a bright future ahead, Jackie seemed destined for success. She was on track to make a positive impact in the world. Tragically, her life was cut short in the summer of 2016 when she had a fatal encounter with a dangerous individual. Upon arriving at the scene, the officer found a worn footpath in a wooded area and followed it to a burned-out patch of land. There, he discovered a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a body that had been set on fire, making it unrecognizable. Due to the severity of the burns, it was impossible to determine the body's identity, including its age, gender, race, or any other distinguishing features. The remains were taken to the medical examiner's office for further examination. Later, fingerprint identification revealed that the body belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergriff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near College, where she visited 2 bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. While waiting for security footage from these establishments, the medical examiner performed an autopsy on Jackie's body. The examination revealed that Jackie was killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire, with further mutilation occurring after her death. The most disturbing aspect of Jackie's murder was the removal of her heart from her body. As news of her death spread throughout Denton, the detectives started receiving numerous tips from people who reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the crime scene where a fire had been set. After further investigation, the detectives were able to acquire CCTV footage from 2 bars that Jackie had visited in the hours leading up to her murder. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House and had a drink at the bar. An hour later, Jackie walked in and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage showed their interactions, suggesting a potential connection between them. About 45 minutes after arriving at the bar, Jackie tweeted, "Glad I decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar." Later, Jackie and the man left the bar together and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they socialized with a group of women. At around 9:45 p.m., Jackie and the man departed Shots and Crafts together. Surveillance cameras tracked their movements, showing them arriving at a convenience store where his car was parked. Jackie got into his vehicle, and that's the last time she was seen before her murder. The detective interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street Public House, where Jackie had applied for a job, and had a friendly conversation with the bartender and a male customer. Although the bartender couldn't provide any information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left the bar, the investigation led the detectives to Shots and Crafts, where security footage showed Jackie and the man together. One of the women at the bar recalled receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. At first, this detail seemed unimportant, but it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the case. After handing over the card, she willingly shared the information with the investigators. The card belonged to Charles Bryant. Meanwhile, the detectives had obtained security footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., showing Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then launched a thorough investigation into Charles Bryant's identity, as he was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. The results were deeply disturbing. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived 20 miles away from Denton, but he was drawn to the city for a specific reason. He was desperate to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who lived in Grapevine and attended the University of North Texas. 3 months prior, Caitlin had met Charles at her home in Grapevine, where she worked as a server at a restaurant. On her high school graduation day, Charles stood out from the high school boys Caitlin knew. He was almost a decade older, in his late 20s, and had a muscular physique covered in tattoos. Working as a personal trainer and bartender, Charles had accumulated unique skills and traits that fascinated Caitlin. In the summer of 2016, Caitlin spent most days with Charles at Grapevine Lake. As they spent more time together, their attraction grew, and Caitlin was drawn to Charles's mysterious personality. However, not everyone was pleased with their relationship. Caitlin's mother noticed the significant age difference between them as they grew closer. Caitlin's mother asked to see a photo of Charles, wanting to understand her daughter's relationship better. Although initially open-minded, she felt uneasy when she saw his piercing eyes, sensing something evil. Growing increasingly worried about Caitlin's well-being, her mother voiced her concerns, advising her to reevaluate her relationship with Charles. Caitlin ignored her mother's warnings, brushing them off as typical parental worries. She was blind to the danger signs beneath the surface of her innocent-sounding romance. Unbeknownst to her, her harmless feelings were about to escalate into a terrifying experience. At first, Caitlin was thrilled with her new relationship with her older boyfriend, but as time went on, she began to have doubts and wondered if her mother had been right all along. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and controlling, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. Charles frequently made Caitlin feel inadequate by telling her she'd never find someone as good as him. As she prepared to leave for college in mid-August 2016, she realized she couldn't ignore the red flags in their relationship any longer and decided to break up with him. The next day, Charles appeared at Caitlin's home, begging her to take him back and promising to change. She initially gave in, but soon realized her mistake. Within a week, Caitlin had moved to Denton for college and ended the relationship once and for all. However, Charles refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, police stopped him on the University of North Texas campus due to his suspicious driving. Although they initially suspected he was driving under the influence, his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, they found he had several outstanding warrants, arrested him, and later released him after several hours. After their breakup, Charles showed up at Caitlin's dorm room at the University of North Texas, which he had somehow found. Caitlin called 911, and by the time the police arrived, Charles was gone. When the officer asked Caitlin what happened, she explained that she had ended their relationship because she was tired of how Charles treated her and spoke to her. Despite this, Charles refused to accept the breakup. The police issued a temporary no trespass order, banning Charles from the UNT campus. However, Charles was determined to find a way to reach Caitlin, even if it meant ignoring the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles found Caitlin on her first day at a new job. When Caitlin saw him, she told him to leave. Caitlin then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and ask that Charles be barred from entering the business. However, the manager told Caitlin that he couldn't grant her request. Caitlin was forced to quit her job because of an incident at her workplace. Charles was determined to confront her and would stop at nothing to exact his revenge and cause her more harm. This led to a cycle of fear and intimidation, putting Caitlin's life in danger. Caitlin's mother was worried about her safety and wanted her to come home, but Caitlin felt safe living in her dorm room on the University of Nebraska campus. However, on September 6th, Charles suddenly appeared at her dorm room, banging on the door and urging Caitlin to come out, claiming he had something for her. Fearing the worst, Caitlin hid in her friend's closet, too scared to emerge. Caitlin's deep-seated fears intensified as she imagined the worst-case scenarios that Charles might have planned for her. Fearing for her life, she made a quick decision and called the emergency services while hiding in a closet, speaking in a barely audible whisper, terrified that Charles might overhear her. Despite the dispatcher's efforts, Caitlin's voice was hardly audible due to her overwhelming fear. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene, but Charles had already escaped. However, he left behind a haunting reminder of his presence, a bouquet of flowers and a handwritten 2-page letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter contained unsettling messages that further fueled Caitlin's fear. Shortly after the incident, the police caught up with Charles outside the campus, where he was dressed in athletic wear, pretending to be a student out for a jog. He was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Caitlin tried to cut all ties with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media. However, he persisted in finding ways to reach out to her, creating multiple accounts to stay in touch. As Charles's behavior became increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin get a protective court order. The very next day, she officially filed a petition for the order, which legally protected her from further harassment. After his first arrest, Charles continued to contact Caitlin despite a protective order against him. This led to his second arrest for stalking, He was arrested again just 2 weeks later for violating the protective order once more. While out on bail, Charles went to a location where Caitlin often hung out, where detectives suspected he met Jackie Vandergriff. Although there was no physical evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder, detectives were concerned for Caitlin's safety due to the circumstantial evidence. Charles sent Caitlin several messages, including photos and texts, which led to his 4th arrest for violating the protective order. While in jail, detectives questioned Charles about Jackie's murder, but he denied any involvement. A search of Charles's home turned up a large military-style knife, Jackie's school purse, and a kiddie pool that matched the one where her body was found. Detectives consulted an expert who specialized in dealing with prolific killers, who believed Charles was hiding something. The expert used a friendly and casual approach to try to gain Charles's trust and get him to talk about the crime. By suggesting possible scenarios and portraying Jackie as an instigator, the expert tried to get Charles to open up. During the 3-hour interrogation, Charles's story changed, and he eventually admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. Detectives believed the motive behind the murder was Charles's uncontrollable rage towards Caitlin, his ex-girlfriend. Charles claimed that Jackie asked him to choke her with a large zip tie he had in his car, but he insisted that her death was an accident, and neither of them had intentionally tightened the zip tie. After the interview, Charles Bryant was arrested and charged with Jackie Vandergriff's murder. Following his arrest, Charles's ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media and checked Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover that they were already friends. This discovery made Caitlin remember receiving a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the day Jackie's body was found, before Caitlin knew about the case. Caitlin became convinced that Charles, the prime suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Christy, who had met Charles on a dating app, was shocked to learn that he had been charged with murder. In her brief time with Charles, she noticed several red flags. He was quiet and reserved, but he became attached to her quickly. When she ended their relationship, Charles persisted, professing his love, despite never having kissed. Christy, who worked with abused children, recognized patterns in Charles's behavior that were similar to those she had seen in her young clients. She suspected that Charles might have been a victim of child abuse. One day, she gathered the courage to ask him directly. To her surprise, Charles admitted to having experienced childhood trauma. The police couldn't find any evidence to support Charles's claims of being abused. Despite this, Christy believed him because she thought he was a kind person and felt sorry for him. She kept in touch with him, but from a distance, and never thought he was capable of murder. Jackie's autopsy didn't provide many answers, such as how she died or where she was killed before her body was dismembered and set on fire. This lack of evidence made it difficult for the prosecution to build a strong murder case, as many key questions remained unanswered. Charles admitted to getting rid of Jackie's body after she died accidentally during rough sex. Although he confessed to disposing of her body, he denied killing her. The prosecution wanted Charles's ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, to testify about his history of stalking and violent behavior. They hoped to show a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and his eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a strong resemblance to Caitlin, as Charles himself acknowledged during questioning. Caitlin testified in court without a jury present, but when asked to identify Charles, she was hesitant and uncomfortable. She eventually pointed him out, commenting on his smirk. After testifying, Caitlin left the courtroom and broke down in tears, overcome with emotion. The judge later ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details about her past relationship with Charles in front of the jury. A year and a half after Jackie's death, Charles went on trial for her murder in April 2018. However, Jackie's best friend couldn't bring herself to attend the trial, finding the thought of facing Charles in person too distressing. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was an 8-year-old girl who lived with her mother, Maria Chavez, and their family in the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy, California. Despite her parents being separated, Sandra remained close to her father and enjoyed a positive relationship with him. Sandra was a friendly and energetic child who loved playing with her friends in the neighborhood. She was known for her bright smile and optimistic outlook, making her a favorite among her peers and the adults who knew her. At the time, she was a second-grade student at Melville S. Jacobson Elementary School. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and went out to play with her friends. Her mother, Maria, usually let her play outside until dinner time. However, when Sandra failed to return home by 7 p.m., Maria began to worry. Maria tried to locate Sandra by calling her friends, but none of them had seen her. She then drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had any information. At 7:53 p.m., Maria called 911 to report her daughter missing. The Tracy Police Department quickly responded to the mobile home park and launched a search operation. They asked Maria to describe Sandra's clothing, which included a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then went door to door, questioning neighbors and showing Sandra's picture to gather information. The search for Sandra was a large-scale operation that involved the FBI, cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a team of volunteers. The police showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the community, hoping to find any leads. However, their initial efforts yielded no results. Police are worried, as Sandra always followed safety rules when leaving with her family. They suspect someone familiar might have lured her. Initially, they suspect her father Daniel, who hadn't seen her in a long time, and was in a financial dispute with her mother Maria. However, he's eventually cleared. The police then focus on an unfamiliar ice cream vendor and Frank Waller, a rumored pedophile who allegedly kissed Sandra 2 years prior. Frank admits to being attracted to young girls, but is eventually eliminated. Authorities will continue to monitor him. As the search continues, the community supports Maria. During a vigil, a neighbor finds a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox and shares it with the officers. A cryptic message was discovered, stating, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Bachet Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." The note's spelling mistakes and suspicious appearance raised questions about its authenticity and the intentions of its writer. Investigators needed more information and decided to interview Melissa, Sandra's neighbor and a Sunday school teacher at her grandfather's church. Melissa explained that she had recently gone through a divorce and a breakup, and now lived with her grandparents and her 5-year-old daughter. Sandra and her sisters often visited Melissa's trailer to play with her daughter, which created a close bond between the two families. When Melissa was questioned, she admitted that she didn't notice anything unusual when she found the note, and she allowed the FBI to search her car. Inside the glove compartment, they found a note with scribbled words, suggesting someone tried to conceal the message. The note was sent for further analysis, and Melissa was released. Weeks passed without any sign of Sandra, but her case took a shocking turn when her body was found inside a black suitcase in an irrigation pond. The suitcase had floated to the surface after the pond was filled 2 weeks prior. Sandra's body was identified by the clothes she was wearing, and an autopsy revealed that she had many cuts and wounds. The suitcase was locked and had an extra cord securing it, indicating that the killer wanted to keep it closed for a longer time. The grim discovery left everyone in shock and horror. The farmer who found the suitcase, Jose Luis Franco, was rewarded $20,000 for alerting the authorities. The autopsy revealed that Sandra had been severely assaulted, with no signs of biological fluids, but indications of an unknown object being used. The cause of death was asphyxiation, and a high dose of alprazolam was found in her system, suggesting she had been drugged. The official cause of death was ruled as homicidal asphyxiation. Tragically, it was determined that Sandra had been murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, sending shockwaves through the community. The investigation revealed that Sandra's killer was not a random abductor, but someone she knew. The police pieced together a profile of their potential suspect. A white male, aged between 25 and 40, with a history of sexual assault or possessing child abuse material. The investigation took a surprising turn when a neighbor reported seeing a dark purple, two-toned SUV near the irrigation pond on the day Sandra disappeared. The car's unusual color and unfamiliarity in the area raised suspicions, and the neighbor's description matched a woman named Melissa Huckabee. Surveillance cameras showed Melissa getting into her SUV near Sandra's house around 3:30 p.m. and then driving towards her own house. She was later seen near the pond around 5:30 p.m. This timeline placed Melissa in the area around the time Sandra went missing, making her a prime suspect. However, when the police approached Melissa, they found that she had attempted suicide by ingesting razor blades and was hospitalized. When questioned later, Melissa claimed she was unaware of what had transpired and had only brought a note to the attention of the authorities. She denied any involvement in Sandra's murder. The police investigated Melissa's alibi and found that her phone records were crucial evidence. Earlier, Melissa had reported a theft to the police, claiming that her suitcase was stolen from her driveway around 4 p.m. She even sent a text message to Maria, mentioning the stolen suitcase. This was significant because the suitcase found with Sandra's body matched the one Melissa reported stolen. Despite the evidence, the authorities wanted more information, so they wiretapped Melissa's phone and waited for her hospital release. When she was released, they were shocked to discover that she had called the Canto family. Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home, but when the police responded, they found no children, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another child to her house. A neighbor then came forward, revealing that Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl to the park without permission, and she was found to have been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. The police suspicion of Melissa grew, and they discovered a notebook in her trailer with handwriting matching the note she claimed to have found. They also found a cryptic note in her car and a drug prescribed to her that matched the one in Sandra's body. During a search of her grandparents' church, they found a rolling pin with blood that matched Sandra's DNA profile and a window blind missing a drawer cord, which matched the cord used to secure the suitcase. This led to Melissa's arrest on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. Melissa Huckabee, a California woman, has been accused of killing 8-year-old Sandra Cantu and faces multiple charges, including sexual assault. Authorities do not expect to make any further arrests in the case. When questioned by investigators, Huckabee initially denied any involvement, but later claimed that Sandra's death was an accident. She said she was playing a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra and her own daughter, and Sandra agreed to hide in a suitcase. Huckabee claimed she forgot Sandra was inside and only remembered when she arrived at a church, finding Sandra's lifeless body. Huckabee eventually confessed to zipping Sandra into the suitcase and leaving her there until it was too late. She then dumped the suitcase containing Sandra's body into a nearby pond. Further investigation into Huckabee's personal life revealed a troubled past, including criminal activities, depression, and other mental health issues. She had a history of theft convictions and had filed for bankruptcy due to credit card debt and medical expenses. Huckabee's family members, including her father and ex-husband, described her as struggling with depression and having issues with her self-image. Despite this, they said she was not prone to violent behavior. Huckabee is currently under suicide watch and faces multiple charges related to Sandra's death. The trial of Melissa Huckabee began on April 14th. During the proceedings, she became emotional when the prosecution described her criminal actions. She closed her eyes and struggled to hold back tears. Prosecutor Thomas Tester presented evidence that Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. Surveillance footage showed that Sandra had intended to visit Melissa's house. The prosecutor alleged that Melissa took Sandra to a church, where she gave her juice laced with a powerful sedative. Once Sandra was unconscious, Melissa attacked and suffocated her to death. Initially, the prosecutor sought the death penalty against Melissa, as she had not yet pleaded guilty to the crimes. However, during the trial, Melissa made a sudden decision to plead guilty, taking full responsibility for her actions. Before accepting her plea, Judge Linda Luss questioned Melissa to ensure she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa confirmed that she was resolute in her decision. Prosecutor Thomas Tester raised concerns about Melissa Huckabee's mental state after Judge Luss finished questioning her. He cited her unusual behavior in prison, including a self-harm incident, which made him question her ability to make rational decisions. Although Melissa seemed coherent in court, Tester worried about her decision-making in the long run. Despite Judge Luss's reassurance, Tester asked Melissa if she understood the situation, likely fearing she might retract her guilty plea. Melissa's admission of guilt marked a significant turning point in the case, bringing some closure to the Cantu family and avoiding a lengthy trial. This crucial moment simplified the legal proceedings and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after Sandra's tragic death. It also paved the way for what would happen next in the case. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the intentional and premeditated murder of Sandra Cantu. The prosecution alleged three special circumstances in this case. Firstly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while kidnapping Sandra Cantu, a violation of Penal Code Sections 207 and 209. Secondly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while engaged in another crime. Thirdly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder during or immediately after attempting to commit rape by instrument, a violation of Penal Code Section 289, as defined in Penal Code Section 1.2. The prosecution has warned that any evidence presented at a preliminary hearing may also be used in future probation violation proceedings or discovery requests. Melissa Huckabee is accused of murdering Sandra Cantu and initially faced additional charges for drugging a 7-year-old girl, although these charges were later dropped as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Melissa has pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. Her heinous crime against a young girl in Tracy, California shocked the nation, and today the court will determine her punishment. This morning, there will be 2 hearings related to the Sandra Cantu murder case. The first hearing will focus on Melissa's sentencing, followed by a decision on whether to lift the gag order. Our correspondent, Lucille Wright, is reporting live from outside the San Joaquin County Courthouse in Stockton, where it promises to be a very busy day. In just 3 hours, Melissa Huckabee will be formally sentenced for the murder and kidnapping of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. The community and Sandra's family are eager for the proceedings to come to an end. Last month, Melissa pleaded guilty and will likely spend the rest of her life in prison without parole. As part of her plea deal, the rape charge against Melissa was dropped, sparing her from the death penalty. During her sentencing, Melissa expressed remorse and confusion over her actions, directly addressing Sandra's mother. She acknowledged that she couldn't understand her own motivations, saying that she wished she could give an explanation for what had happened, and that she still couldn't understand why she had done what she had done. Melissa also apologized, saying that for the pain she had caused, saying sorry wasn't enough, but it was all she could do. She added that since the day Sandra had died, she had had to live with the consequences of her actions, and that for the rest of her life, she would have to live with the responsibility of Sandra's death. Sandra's father expressed his struggle to forgive Melissa, saying that they were supposed to forgive their enemies, but he didn't know what to make of her. He added that nothing that happened that day would change the fact that she had taken the life of an innocent little girl who hadn't even gotten to decide what ice cream to eat. The community was deeply affected by Sandra's tragic death. On April 16, 2019, over 600 people attended her funeral to pay their respects. To honor her memory, volunteers planted a tree and built a new playground at Jacobson Elementary School, and one of her cousins started an annual celebration called Tracy Celebrates Children, which helps local kids get fingerprinted and photographed in case they go missing. The prosecutors believed that Melissa deliberately planned and executed the tragic event, but she never shared her motives, leaving investigators baffled. Melissa's past struggles with depression, difficult history, and self-harm were revealed in documents, but they didn't provide a clear explanation for her actions. Melissa is now serving a life sentence in San Juan County Jail, a constant reminder that serious crimes have serious consequences. While the pain of losing Sandra will never fully heal, her family finds solace in knowing that justice has been served, and her death did not go unanswered.